perhaps the solution for staying safe in Amsterdam actually involves living on the water instead. The latest architectural creation is these floating houses in the Ischberg district on the outskirts of Amsterdam. This suburb is composed of 7 artificial islands and houses that float.
We see it as a technical solution, which is very safe. It has the exact same comfort and aspects as a normal house. The only thing, sometimes we call it a boat because of regulations, and sometimes we call it a house of regulations. So we think about more flexible cities. How can we use the water to be responsive, to react on everything that's happening around you, to be ready for an unexpected future?
For the moment, these floating homes are among architects' preferred means of adapting to the rising water levels that are one of the biggest challenges currently facing the country. The houses are supported by floating concrete tanks immersed in the water. The rest of the construction is made of light steel and wooden panels, which allow for a traditional layout inside. The houses are anchored to the bottom of the lake with steel mooring posts to stop them drifting. But here again, there is a flip side that must be taken into account. Behind this idyllic image of life on the water, these floating houses are already posing some ecological problems. As always, technological innovation disrupts ecosystems. These houses resting on concrete tanks make the water surface opaque. This lack of light causes aquatic life to die. Faced with this new problem, engineers and architects have had to propose new solutions, such as houses on stilts.
The most important thing is that if we start building on water, it's not architecture above the water, but it's architecture also underneath the water. We call this blue habitats. And if I go to a city, the first question they ask, what is the effect on the ecology, on the water system? So we build artificial corals underneath it. We bring enough water, light and air in it. And by that we can influence the system. That means that if you're in the middle of a river or the middle of a sea, we can create these buildings and they start to be as catalyst functions for creating new ecosystems around it.
But is this floating home solution enough to cope with the major upheavals awaiting the Netherlands? In 100 years, entire regions of the Netherlands will most likely be wiped off the map due to rising sea levels caused by melting glaciers combined with coastal erosion and land subsidence. The entire western facade of the country, as well as the inland areas to the south and west of Amsterdam, could be completely erased and submerged by water. Despite all their inventiveness and technicality, the Dutch may no longer be able to find land for shelter.
Living in such a vulnerable country, that means that if there's more water, more climate change, we probably have to leave our country. Because if we do nothing, if we just keep them as it is, if we don't make our levees higher, if we don't find solutions to be floating, then we will be the first to leave.
Float or leave. This is the dilemma caused by climate change that is facing the Dutch. Once again, they will have to come up with an answer, armed with their knowledge of water management.
There are extreme scenarios, and I also believe that then within the country we could do great things. If you think of our response and reconstruction after the Second World War, then a population can do a lot in a short time when the need is there.
And the Dutch are proving this to be true. Right now, a unique project on a gigantic scale is in development. The idea is to build a wall to hold back the sea. It involves a truly colossal dam that would close the North Sea in 2 places. 2 gigantic walls would have to be built in the middle of the sea. The first, some 500 kilometres long, would connect the Scottish coast with Norway. The second, 150 kilometres long, would extend from the southern tip of the UK to the coast of Brittany. This outlandish project would protect 25 million people from the risk of submersion. For the time being, this project is not the subject of a political and economic debate on a European level. It is an alarm bell being rung by Dutch scientists to raise awareness about government inaction on climate change. But once again, the impact of such a construction would be immense. This dam, on an unimaginable scale, would transform the North Sea into a freshwater lake. Such extensive modifications of an existing ecosystem would irreversibly disturb the surrounding ocean currents, including the famous Gulf Stream. It is this ocean current that ensures mild winters across Europe. Without the Gulf Stream, every country in Europe, including the Netherlands, might then experience winters like those enjoyed in Siberia.
The problem is that when you build a wall, you think you're protected. But it's always the same. You carry on expanding, creating, and building behind the wall because you think it's protecting you. And that's what risk management is about. You try to resist and protect yourself. But if the wall or the dike were to be breached, well, you can imagine the scale of the disaster that would ensue.
The risk of a technical failure is huge. One only has to imagine the amount of water that would be held back by these two dams. And if a breach were to occur, the flooding of the entire coastline would be a catastrophe for which no one could ever be prepared.
Now, evacuation of, let's say, the region of Rotterdam, The Hague, our capital, and Amsterdam, within 24 hours, it's impossible. Millions of people evacuate out of that area. So the evacuation plan is also to get people to higher ground. So our evacuation is more a vertical evacuation than a horizontal evacuation.
And the first region that might risk being wiped off the map is Flevoland, the suburb of Amsterdam. This immense polder, this land reclaimed from the sea, is today the area most at risk. 400,000 people live and work here, a population comparable to that of Manchester or Miami. It is absolutely necessary to ensure its safety.
It's not a technical problem, it's a societal choice that must be made. And that's the biggest problem for us now. We know that sea levels are going to rise by 2 or 3 meters, but we don't know when. We have to make the right political decisions now, which won't harm us in future. This is our duty.
The example of Flevoland, the newest and most endangered province, is leading the Dutch to change their attitudes. At a time of climate change, a new environmental consciousness is emerging, encouraging them to give up on the idea of more growth.
Today's society values the natural system and nature much more, and is hence in favor of leaving it as it is.
We have to listen to nature, we have to live with water, and we have to follow nature, and then see what we can do with that. Only fight against it, that doesn't work anymore. We should understand what the water is doing, what nature is doing, and then make the best of it.
The time has come to return artificially created land to the sea. Depolderization is the new choice of the Dutch authorities to protect the country from danger. Reclaiming land, this practice that has been carried out for centuries, has, under the effect of climate change, had a negative effect. Hiding behind a dike, there is a growing awareness of the risks.
But I also think that on schools they don't teach the students enough how this country works. Because if you would talk to just somebody here on the street, they say, yes, we know we have polders and we know we live below sea level, but they don't know that it is an active system. If you're not pumping water out, we will drown.
Avoiding ending up underwater has been the challenge facing the Dutch since the Middle Ages, with their incredible engineers and the most sophisticated anti-flood systems in the world. Today, this country, whose coastlines look like lace spread across the North Sea, finds itself at a turning point for its very survival. Global warming is causing sea levels to rise relentlessly. So how could we have imagined that the storm of 1953, as violent as it was, could today be 3 times more destructive, and that next time it could well reach Amsterdam? Will the Maasvlakte-Kering and the Hartelkering barriers have to close more often in the coming years? Will the Oosterschedelkering, which some call the 8th wonder of the world, with its 35-metre-high pillars weighing 18,000 tons each, still be able to hold back a sudden rise in the North Sea? If the water rises more than 10 metres, what will become of the Afsluitdijk, the enclosure dam created at the beginning of the 20th century, which was considered to be a model of safety? 1 degree? 2? Or even 3.5? How much temperatures will rise is the great unknown. The entire system underpinning this country could collapse like a series of dominoes if the temperature rises. In the end, there is no technological prowess that can ever withstand the full force of nature.